From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Dan Harary, broadcasting from my office in Beverly Hills, California. I hope you're all having a great summer. I've taken a few weeks off on this podcast to work on the screenplay for my book, After They Came. I've written a screenplay, and I am pursuing Hollywood producers and Hollywood agents to try to get someone interested in working with me to develop After They Came, hopefully for the screen. It's a story about benevolent aliens come to Earth, save mankind, and solve all of our problems. It should only happen. And After They Came is now an audiobook. It is now an audiobook. I just finished it recently. Please go to Amazon.com. Check out my books, and also Dan Harary, author. You can check out my books there as well. Also, I am the chairman of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and we just announced our 200th member. We are a networking group comprised of UAP and ET experiencers, researchers, and disclosure advocates, blended and meshed in together with Hollywood storytellers, writers, producers, directors. And we're growing. We just released a documentary. It's on YouTube. It's called Inside Hollywood, Aliens, UFOs, and the Quest for Disclosure. I produced that film. Check that out. It's free to watch on YouTube. And if you'd like to join, it's HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. Check that out as well. We have a very special guest today. He's become a friend of mine and a colleague. And I'll read his little bio here, and then we'll jump right in. Christopher Johnston is a recognized trial attorney and certified civil trial specialist with over 2 decades of litigation experience. He has successfully argued cases before the Iowa Supreme Court and has built a reputation as a fierce advocate and legal thinker. So if any of you out there in Iowa get in trouble legally, you want to check out my friend Christopher Johnston. A few months ago, Chris released a new book entitled Roswell, The Truth on Trial, The Evidence Speaks, You Decide, which reimagines the legendary 1947 UFO crash at Roswell as a jury trial, complete with opening statements, witness testimony, and closing arguments, placing the reader in the role of juror. Beyond the courtroom, Chris is a founding member of my organization, the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and he's a lifelong ufologist with a background in both astrobiology and space law. He has completed certificate coursework in astrobiology and earned a certificate in space law through the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, which we'll definitely be talking about that with him. Chris is also a contributing member of MUFON and has authored several articles for the MUFON Journal. Chris brings a rare blend of legal expertise, scientific curiosity, and investigative rigor to the conversation around UAP disclosure, making him a powerful voice who stands at the intersection of law, science, and the unexplained. And now, if I don't screw this up horribly, I will bring in my friend Chris Johnston. There he is.
Hey, Dan.
Hey there. How'd I do?
You did great. The best part about doing these is hearing my own bio.
I know, don't you? I know. I have the same when I do them. Usually what I say is to the person, after they read it, I go, God, when do I sleep? Same as you, Chris. When do you sleep, brother?
Yeah, I make it happen. And I'm one of those guys, pretty type A, so it works out.
Yeah, no, you've accomplished a great deal. So I always ask my guests the question 101, the Dan question 101 is, where are you from originally? What did your parents do? And what kind of interests did you have as a child?
Sure. I originally small town central Wisconsin until about 10, and then formative years, kind of junior high, high school in Kansas City. And then from there, I moved out to Boston for a handful of years. And then I suppose I really call St. Paul, Minnesota home. I was in St. Paul for 28 years. And now I'm here in Des Moines, Iowa, where I've been for about the last 3 or 4.
Okay.
Growing up in the 70s, mom was a traditional stay-at-home mom, and my dad was an anesthetist at the local hospital.
Okay.
And so I just had that somewhat idyllic, 70s upbringing in small town central Wisconsin. As a kid, all the sports, baseball, football, big Packers fan, which is now morphed into a Vikings fan, I'm happy to say. And some of my hobbies, it ties in with, a lot of people ask, why the book? My dad, being an anesthetist, very much a man of science, and in particular science fiction. And he was not into sports. So some kids were bonding, playing catch with their dad. I'm watching anything UFO that he can get his hands on, talking about it with my dad. One of my earliest memories, very traumatizing, but frequently my dad would go, tonight might be the night tonight, Christopher. That UFO lands in the backyard. You won't see me again. So terrifying, but at the same time, boy, if I want to be with Dad, I better get on board with this UFO stuff. So that's, as you commented, a lifelong ufologist, and I really, really have been.
That's cool. Is your dad still alive?
No, he's not. He passed in 2014.
Okay. And plus, during the 70s, you were into Rush, I'm sure.
Oh yes.
You love the band Rush, my friend.
I am one of those Rush nerds, as they classify as people who love them or hate them, and I'm one of those over the top guys. And I play guitar too. I got a smattering of hobbies, but yes, I like to hold myself out as a guitar player.
Have you ever met any of your guitar heroes?
I have not. And they say don't meet your heroes. You can only be disappointed. I'm willing to take the risk, but with each passing day when I never meet anybody, I remind myself of that.
I've met quite a few of my heroes, actually, and most of them were very, very lovely people. Most of them were very nice people.
Well, good. You had the good experiences then.
Okay, so tell us about, before we get into the fun stuff of Roswell and ufology, tell us about your work. You are a very established, successful attorney in Des Moines area. Tell us, what kind of cases do you have? What do you enjoy about being an attorney?
Sure. Right. So to be clear, I'm licensed in Minnesota and Iowa, and my firm is actually headquartered in the Twin Cities. So my law partner, Chris Martineau, as far as I know, he's sitting up in the office right now doing his thing. We expanded down here into Des Moines back in 2015. And so then I ended up relocating a handful of years. So I run the Iowa office. My partner runs the Minnesota office. Out of Minnesota, out of the cities, we primarily are involved with trucking litigation. So cases involving semi-trucks and injury. That's the gist up there. Then here out of our Iowa office, we're under the trade name Law Group of Iowa. And I classify this more as your sort of consumer level man on the street law. We offer estate planning, family law, criminal defense, personal injury, and I run our personal injury department. And I'll tell you, Dan, I have handled everything from the seemingly most inconsequential type of injuries and how they can happen up to absolutely horrific, catastrophic injury type of work, and kind of everything in between. For a personal preference, I enjoy a lot of the trucking work that we do because it's very different. It's very interesting. And then there's a practice area that's referred to as premises liability. So Dan goes to his friend's house and the deck falls off the building, right? So those kinds of things. And I get a lot of calls from other lawyers. And this somewhat does tie into the book. You have to be creative in these premises liability cases. Okay, well, Dan, the the balcony broke and you fell off and broke your leg. Well, who's actually at fault, and how are we going to couch this up, and where are you going to look? And I point that out because if you're dealing with a car accident, for example, A runs into B. It's pretty simple, usually pretty straightforward.
Sure.
So I like, say, the cases where the liability is a little twisted together, and I like the untwisting and presenting the cases.
Have you gotten, multi-million-dollar settlements for some of your people?
Yes, I have.
That has to be rewarding to some degree, I would think.
It's very rewarding, and it's also frustrating because I'm well aware on the civil side, which is what I do, money's not going to make you feel better. Money's not going to cure your paralysis, and
right.
No matter how much I put in somebody's pocket, I've never had a client in 25 years go, yeah, that was worth it. And so it is. It's frustrating. You can help people be in the best position they can be, but you're not ever eliminating the root problem. And so it's very gratifying. In particular, like I said, I handle a lot of quirky cases, a lot of cases that a lot of lawyers turn down. Those are very gratifying when they land on my desk and I can turn it into something and get a result for the client.
Okay. All right, cool. I got you. All right. So you mentioned your dad. It sounds like your dad was a ufologist, or at least a fan of ufology.
Yes.
And he would take you outside as a child, and you would look up at the sky. So that's where your interest in ufology began, was with your dad as a child. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
And did you and your dad ever see anything remarkable?
No, I think I got a fair amount of wishful dad, pointing at shooting stars. Like, Christopher, come on, right? But nothing ever concrete that came from that. I did have my own experience that we can talk about or not, or I can tell you later.
Sure.
So, and this was they're all interesting, right? And especially when they happen to you, they're extra interesting. I try to remain, and this was true to my book, fact focused, right? And not, sure, we all like to fill in the blanks, but on my experience, the facts I can give you are as such. It was 1991, and at the time, before I went to law school, I managed hotels in different locations around the country. And I was a young budding manager, and we were having a Christmas party. And this book that I had on how to be a good manager said, well, you want to show up, you want to be seen, you have one beer or whatever, and then you leave. So that's good, man. Your employees see you, but you're not staying and wrecking their night. And that's how I can remember this also specifically. So I went to the bar, I talked to a couple of my employees, I had one beer, and I left. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed at home at about 7 o'clock the next morning. No idea what had happened. I had a roommate at the time because I was only 22. He confirmed that I came home at 4 o'clock in the morning. He's like, what the hell did you do last night? And I'm trying to fill in the blanks. It's like, well, what do you know? And he said, you came home at 4, you made a bunch of ruckus, and you went down to your bedroom. So then I went back to the employees. Hey, what time did I leave the bar? Well, it's about 9 o'clock. So I had witnesses seeing me leave the bar, a witness seeing me come home, missing time of about 7 hours with no recall at all. Right.
And there's no chance that beer was drugged or something.
Well, and here's the deal. I have over the years, because this story has really stuck with me. So, and of course, that's the go-to question. Well, you were drinking. And so I like to point out, well, first of all, I was 22. And I assure you, even at 22, I could handle more than one beer. 2 roofies, which we all tend to think about.
Yeah.
They were around, but not really a thing in 91. It wasn't an issue like it is now. And from what I've read, say it was a roofie, for example, apparently those make you just horribly sick for the next day or two. I woke up at 7 the next morning, felt like $1 million. So, no hangover, no illness, no nothing. So,
do you remember leaving the bar or leaving that party? Like just getting back into your car? Do you remember that?
I vaguely remember leaving the bar. Now what's another interesting wrinkle, and this is also fact, I had flashes of a memory of being in a field. Okay, so I had 7 hours missing and flashes of being in a field. And when I went out to the driveway, shoved up all underneath my bumpers and in my wheel wells, tall grasses and crap.
Okay, so somehow you and your car, and how far was a field from that party?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what field it was. I don't know where I was. And again, trying to keep it that factual.
Yeah.
All I can tell you, I left at 9, I got home at 4, had flashes of being in a field and grasses up in my car.
That's a very good missing time story, for
Yeah,
sure.
and that's one where whenever I see the regressive hypnosis and stuff on TV, I'm always saying, I got to do that one of these days.
I'll hook you up with Yvonne Smith.
That would be fantastic.
She's one of the top people. She's part of HDA. She's here in LA. She can do it over Zoom even. I'll hook you up with, she's excellent. She's one of the top people in the world.
Great.
Did you have any marks or pains, aches, scratches, bruises, anything?
No, not from that. But are you familiar with the like the red mark phenomenon?
I've seen all kinds of people. Yeah. Experiencers have all kinds of marks, but no, I don't know what that is.
Specifically, as it pertains to the red mark, people will have, for reasons unknown to them, and it's usually in a grid pattern somewhere on their body. A grid pattern, it would look like freckles, but more red. But they're always laid out in these strange grid patterns.
Okay, right.
I have been having those since I was a tiny little kid. Wake up and I'd have one, and it's about, maybe 2 by 2 and slightly different patterns, but perfectly gridded out red marks.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of weird. I've never dug into anything beyond. I do know that other people report that phenomenon, and I've never, in fact, there's a Facebook page about it, and I have never heard or seen any dermatologist or doc of any other nature pop up and go, oh yeah, it's this, and so I have had that experience, but I don't know what that is.
Have they appeared all over your body or one place?
No, all different locations, always upper body, usually shoulder blade. In fact, the first ones I ever had was on my shoulder blade, and my mom asked me about it, and I was just a kid. I'm like, it's the hell out of me. I don't know.
Interesting. So after that night from that party, when you drove into a field, next morning you woke up, did you have the grid pattern that day?
Nope.
Okay, because that would have been the home run.
Helpful, yes. Yeah.
That would have been the home run, right? Okay. All right. So your book, Roswell: The Truth on Trial, which I loved, I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you.
It presents that famous UFO crash as though it were a jury trial, and the reader is a juror. You present, here's the evidence, here's what really happened. And then you did really well with the skeptics, weather balloon. Yeah. And as I'm reading your book, I was getting so frustrated at the truth embargo, which is so painfully obvious, of what the Army and the military and the government did in July of 1947. It's just so painfully obvious how they covered that up. Mm-hmm. How did you research this book, and why did you pick the Roswell topic in particular?
Sure. And I'll do it in reverse order there. The reason I selected Roswell, well, first, the reason I even wrote the book is, I don't know about you or your listeners, but, you get to that point in life where kids are now gone, and suddenly it seems you have ungodly amounts of free time.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
I should mention, being from Minnesota, my boys are hockey players. And if you didn't raise hockey players, you're at the rink 5 to 7 nights a week. So you're busy, and then everybody's gone. So one, I finally had some time in my life to kind of play with some of my passions. And I was considering, my 2 passions, UFOs and trial work.
And guitar. You left out guitar. You have three passions.
That's true. That is true. So I figured, well, the purpose of the book was a couplefold. One, let me answer your question more directly. You said, why Roswell? So when I decided I was going to write a book, I needed a topic that had enough source material that it could fill one entire book. I considered I could do one book with several different stories in it, kind of thing, but I didn't know how this was going to be received. And I thought, if this is going to be a one-time deal, I want something big, something, a lot of information that I can draw from, and something that folks, even that aren't necessarily into UFOs, might have some passing knowledge or awareness of. So that's why I selected the Roswell incident is the topic for my book. And again, how I did it. One nice thing about Roswell, about my book, and it's important to mention, although I wrote all the questioning by the attorneys, plaintiff and defense, or believer and skeptic, as I have them couched in this book, all of their answers, all of the testimony provided within the book, I drew from prior interviews or statements or what have you, given by those witnesses. So this wasn't Chris Johnston imagining what these people would say. Rather, it was, well, you already said it, and now granted, I had to write the questions in such a way that to carry the narrative, right, if you will. But that's where that all came from. And so, like the rest of the world, I beat the bushes and used the internet, and I compiled interview after interview, and then I would condense them down to what I could extract out of it, what was good, what was bad, and that's how I set it up.
How long did it take you to do the research before you? I mean, you had to do a hell of a lot of research before you even started writing the book.
Yeah, beginning to end, from about beginning of thought process to hitting publish on Amazon.
Yeah,
about a year, give or take. Okay. Which I know really in the realm of writing a book isn't that long. I can get really obsessive about things, much to my wife's chagrin. And when I get going on something and I got my teeth in it, that's what I do till that is done. So,
but like you said, sorry, there's a wealth of source material that exists.
Right.
Did you watch like old episodes of Ancient Aliens or documentaries or read a million Roswell books, Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall? Did you read all those books, or did you say, and now I'm going to maybe not read all the books?
I probably, if it's been on TV or the internet, I've seen it. If it's in print, I've probably read about half of it. But great, it's a great question. It's just like real trial work. At a certain point, right, you're going to have there's a fair amount of duplicative evidence where the same four people are telling us the same four things, right? So there's no point in including all four of those people, right? And again, it would be objected to as duplicative. So as I was preparing, I knew the people that I needed, because it's also a book and a story. So I had to carry the narrative, right, kind of beginning to end, so people would know what happened. And at the same time, I tried to use witnesses that weren't way out in right field or way out in left field. I wanted the reader / juror to really have to go, wow, okay, this is kind of a closer call than I thought. And so that was by design for witness selection.
No, I thought you honed it down really, really well. I mean, you had Mac Brazel and Jesse Marcel and Walter Haut. See, I always sympathize with Walter Haut because he was the press officer there, right? And I'm a publicist, as you know.
Right.
And if I was the publicist at Roswell, it would have been me. I would have been Walter Haut, right? I would have put out the press release that ran all over the world. I mean, talk about an effective press release. He only brought it to the 2 radio stations and the 2 newspapers. And in those days, there were no fax machines. So he literally had 4 copies of a piece of paper. He drove in his car to the 4 media outlets. And then AP and UPI picked it up. And the story ran all over the world. So as far as being a PR person, that's one of the biggest home runs in the history of PR. And then, I imagine Chris the next morning, President Truman is reading, getting his coffee and his croissant from the butler. Here, Mr. President, here's your newspaper. And he opens the paper. What? Roswell, what? What? Those guys did what? Without my permission? They didn't tell me there's a flying saucer. Who the hell do they think? And his head must have exploded. Truman's head must have exploded. And he or whoever would have called Blanchard or Walter Haut or whoever and just imagine that. Wouldn't you love to hear, who the F do you think you are telling the world there's aliens? I'm the president. You didn't run this past me?
Yeah.
Retract. The hardest thing for a publicist to do in the world is to retract a press release that has gone out all over the world. How do you retract that? It's putting toothpaste back in the tube. How do you do that? Well, they came up with a brilliant plan. Oopsie. Whoa, we made a mistake. Sorry. Weather balloon. And then poor Jesse Marcel, when he's holding, Reynolds Wrap that held Roger Ramey's Fish, probably.
Right.
And he's there, with that look. I mean, you look at that face of Jesse Marcel in that famous photo. He's like, man, I can't believe I have to do this.
Right.
And he was ordered to do that. Don't you feel bad for that guy?
I feel bad for him, yes. And I address this exact topic in my book. And because that's always what we've heard, right? Is that Jesse Marcel, he knew it was different and he didn't want to do it. You can tell by the look on his face, et cetera, et cetera. But why did he go along with it? Well, he's following orders, right?
Oh, he had to.
Well, right. But I undercut him when I was on defense in the book. You go after how important is it to follow orders, et cetera, and you get him really locked into his position. Okay, well, Major Marcel, I am also confident that the orders were to not take it to your house and show it to your family. Would you agree with that? Right? Of course, he has to say, yeah. And so now you start, okay, well, he's telling you on the one hand, he'll follow orders, but on the other hand, not when it suits his other purposes. So,
right.
But then in so doing, by taking the stuff home, he created more witnesses, by
his wife and his son. Yeah.
Right. So it's one of those interesting catch-22s in the legal work. I'd be all over him about that element, but it kind of worked out well for the believers by creating these more witnesses.
Absolutely. And once he came forward, Stanton Friedman in the 70s uncovered the truth about this event, and then Jesse Marcel Sr. came forward decades later and said, you know what, before I die, I am going to tell the world that this really happened. I'm friendly with Jesse Marcel III. That was his grandson. And Jesse Marcel III told me that when he was 8, he was in a rowboat or a little fishing boat with his grandfather, and they were fishing, and the grandfather said to his grandson, we discovered extraterrestrial beings and a craft from outer space. And now, what grandfather is going to lie to his 8-year-old grandson when they're fishing? It's not. So there's so much anecdotal evidence, and there was real evidence that we'll never see. I mean, I bet you it's still in the Pentagon in a box somewhere. Remember at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Remember all the boxes in that warehouse? That's where the Roswell stuff is probably.
Just don't open the wrong one or your face will melt.
Yeah, right. And also X-Files. I was a huge X-Files fan. Anytime Smoking Man had a thing, he'd put it in a box and shove it in the Pentagon, and he'd walk and you used to see aisles and aisles of cartons in the Pentagon.
Right. Which is much more believable than the military's statement that all the Roswell material, it's all been lost. Right? I think that was their position in 90. It's all gone. We don't have a shred of it, which sure you don't.
Yeah, you don't have a shred of it. All right, so let me ask you this question. So to me, here's what happened. A craft from outer space was flying around Roswell early July 47 on the night of a lightning storm. And I believe, and I think this is common knowledge, that perhaps a bolt of lightning hit part of the craft. And what was found on Mac Brazel's farm was almost like liquid metal that had solidified into like aluminum foil, pieces of foil. But that was not the craft or the aliens. They flew another, I think it's 40 or 50 miles and crashed in Corona. So there was a part A, which was just stuff on the ground. And that's what everyone thinks was the Roswell crash. But the real crash was at Corona, miles away, when they discovered the disc and the 4 dead bodies and the 1 living body. Do you think that that's the best theory? Is the lightning that hit part of it and it melted and it flew and then it crashed? Do you think that's what happened?
I think that's a good theory. And that for the most part, that's the same theory that I subscribe to. If I was putting money down, I agree with about 90% of that theory. However, I am not ready. And again, this is just based on, some of this came to me as I was working on my book. The bodies. The discussion of the bodies, I don't think is near as solid as it is that there was a craft. I would say all day long, yep, there was a craft. But you start looking at the situation with the bodies, and everyone goes, well, Glenn Dennis, right? He was the local mortician there.
Yeah.
Okay, he got the call. He also never provided the coffins because he didn't have anything available. He would have had to order them in. But then, for reasons unknown, he decided to go to the base anyway, even though he was just the mortician and didn't have the stuff with him that he requested. And then, later it comes out that, well, I might have heard from this nurse. I'm sure the big mysterious
the nurse.
nurse.
Yeah. And did they ever come up with who the nurse was? Did they ever? Anyone have a name for her?
No. And so that's problematic as well. And I've heard two different theories on that nurse. Being a Minnesotan, the one that really stuck to me was that she was from St. Paul, and after Roswell, she went back to St. Paul. So there's that local connection.
Well, I think after Roswell, she vanished.
And then I've heard that she also went after Roswell to somewhere to Europe, and regardless of where she went, right, she vanished. And from a court of law evidentiary standpoint, that's a big, kind of a big red flag. And, you used the word a few moments ago, anecdotal evidence. Right. And that's one of the problems, not just from my book, but the whole damn thing, right, is that the actual physical evidence, which I believe exists, well, you and I sure don't have it. So, and then there is a lot of, I like to think over the 25 years of being an attorney, I'm pretty quick at, pointing out some holes and issues. The amount of hearsay, right, that's involved. And the formal definition of hearsay is an out-of-court utterance offered to support the truth of the matter asserted. So there's your big fancy 20-cent legal phrase for the day. And I can even put it in kind of modern terms, where with all the congressional hearings that are going on.
Right.
And, a lot of us are guilty of, you just read a headline or the little sub headline or what have you. And people are jumping up and down about, Grush is telling us, this, that, and the other thing. If you actually listen to the testimony, it's all inadmissible hearsay. Well, I've talked to 40 people and they said,
right.
I don't care what that's not evidence. Now granted, and not to totally, now he did say, well, there are some things I could talk to you about in a skiff. So I don't want to say the guy doesn't know anything. I'm just saying what is actually being presented to the citizens is real thin.
Okay, we're going to take a little break right now. We need to hear from a very handsome fellow who's going to be talking about his book called After They Came, and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm Dan Harary, author of the sci-fi novel After They Came. After They Came tells the story of Jonathan Tuckerman, a Los Angeles man down on his luck and truly alone in life, who decides to mark his 70th birthday by drowning himself in the Pacific Ocean. Instead, he inadvertently becomes the world's Wonder Man after a pair of extraterrestrial visitors from the Pleiades appear in a giant spacecraft, pluck him from the sea, and present him to the media and the world as their ambassador to mankind. Many leading UFO researchers have embraced After They Came. Nick Pope has called the novel, quote, a delightful tale of wonder and hope. Richard Dolan adds, quote, this book is a captivating novel of benevolent alien contact. And famous alien abductee Travis Walton has said, quote, After They Came is presented in such a graphic visual style, it could serve as the basis for an entertaining film adaptation. After They Came is now available on paperback right here at Genius Book Publishing. And we're back. By the way, my book, After They Came, is now also available as an audiobook. It just was released as an audiobook. After They Came, print, ebook, audiobook, all available on Amazon.com. Thank you. So the bodies, sorry, you made a good point about the bodies. Only a few people claim that they saw bodies. Philip Corso said he saw one at Wright-Patterson. And then there's the rumor that one of them, one of them was alive and lived until 1952. So the fact that there was this liquid metal all over Mac Brazel's farm, that's uncontested. Everyone, that's common knowledge.
Correct.
And then an actual craft crashed in Corona, because that was in a press release that ran all over the world. That's pretty much documented. But you make a good point. The bodies was always sort of a big question mark, huh?
All right. And when it makes sense to me, and I am far from a great military historian, so I'll just put that out there. It seems to me there's a lot of sense to send materials like that to Wright-Patterson, right? It makes perfect sense. Wright-Patterson is not known for its medical facilities. Now, I'm very close to someone who is director at the hospital at Wright-Pat throughout the 90s, okay? And great hospital, but not a teaching hospital, not an exploratory hospital, not if I had some extraterrestrial bodies, that is not the location that I would be sending them to have the testing done on it. Now, so did everything, if it all, let's say it's all real, everything goes to Wright-Pat, were the bodies then sent elsewhere? Because that also, again, based on some insider knowledge of people that I know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have bodies for, autopsy or what have you at Wright-Pat.
Yeah, it seems to me it would be like maybe Bethesda Naval Hospital, right, or some famous medical facility.
Right, exactly. Because I know even at Wright-Pat, there are procedures that, hey, we're not going to do that to you here, Dan. You're going to have to go, to another location. It seems to me autopsying an extraterrestrial body would be about top of the line for most challenging, complicated, and important work ever. So that hospital gives me pause.
Okay. All right. I wonder if we took a poll today of Americans today, the Roswell UFO crash, real or fake? Check one. Right. I bet you'd be 50-50.
Well, I think if we could get everyone to buy my book and then do a poll today,
right?
Everyone read my book and do a poll tomorrow. It'd be interesting mental exercise.
Well, when I was reading your book, because I absolutely 100% know that something happened there, and I believe it was extraterrestrial, and I'm hopeful that they were bodies. And then when you present your skeptics' point of view, it's like, God, boy, they sure did a hell of a job.
Yeah,
they did such a good job to obfuscate. I like that word, right? Obfuscate. Yeah. They obfuscated the hell out of the Roswell crash, and you presented it, man. And like if I sent that book to my mother, she could say, "I don't know that there was a craft. It was a weather balloon." Yeah. So you presented both sides really, even though you're a ufologist yourself. Yep. You did it. You did it right. You balanced the scales of justice really, really well.
Thank you. Because it was hard to do because I am not a judge. I am a plaintiff attorney. I'm a zealous advocate. I come from a standpoint of advocacy. So believe me, I'd be writing testimony and I'd be going and going. I go, wait a second, I'm into lawyer mode now, trying to support one side over the other. So
wouldn't it be great if the Army? Did you ever see? I watch it every few years. I think the BBC years ago did the trial, Lee Harvey Oswald on trial. It was done in the, I'm going to say late 80s. Obviously he was dead, but they had Vincent Bugliosi as the prosecutor, and they had this Jerry something from Texas, this famous Texas guy, as Lee Harvey Oswald's lawyer. He was a defendant, and they presented both sides. Did Lee do it or did he not do it? And there's so much evidence on both sides of that coin. And I thought that was so well done. So when I was reading your book, I was thinking about Lee Harvey Oswald on trial. Why don't we tease your new book? You mentioned to me privately you have a new book coming out. What's going on with your new book?
New book is same format, new topic, crop circles, the truth on trial. And
how are you? Have you ever been? Have you ever seen one? Have you been inside one?
I have not. And I'll tell you what, after working on this, I am now, if anybody finds an active one, a new one, I'm there. It is, it is you and I are kind of talking about, we all have our very interests and sub-interests in this topic. And crop circles, I've always found interesting. Boy, compiling the research I've been working on for this book, fascinating. Wow. Fascinating topic. So,
are you interviewing experts in this field?
I have a couple of emails out. Maybe is the answer. One thing about the crop circles, it's going to enable me. Again, there's a lot of source material, but again, a lot of it goes back to that duplicative evidence I was talking about.
Sure.
So I'm able, in crop circles, I'm going to expand it a little bit further than just rock hard former testimony provided. For example, you're probably familiar with that old print from the late 1600s of the mowing devil that some people try to chalk at. Yeah. So, for example, we're going to start with an art historian, right? And really kind of educate throughout, hey, well, you got this print and they say this, what do you think? So, and that's going to be not based on prior testimony, but that'll be based on research. So I'm not sure where it's all going to go, as far as including actual interviews versus, what comes out of here comes out of, prior interviews.
I have a friend who, her name is Camille Harmon. She's a good friend of mine. She spent some time in a crop circle in England,
cool.
in it for a few hours. If you ever want to talk to an experiencer, let me know.
Okay.
That might be interesting. But are you going to have any illustrations in that book or no?
Yes, I plan to. In fact, I can confirm it today for you and you alone. Yes, I will have illustrations.
Okay. All right. So what's the time frame for that book, do you think? Spring? Fall?
Well, yeah, winter time, Christmassy. Okay. Like I mentioned, I really get into projects, and I always have multiple irons in the fire, so it's kind of which one is winning on that given day. But yeah, I would say right around Christmas is probably a fair estimate.
Okay. And then we mentioned a little earlier, just between you and I, if you ever want to do the Betty and Barney Hill Truth on Trial or Travis Walton Truth on Trial, let me know, and I'll hook you up with people.
Thank you. There's no shortage of topics, for sure. Almost to a daunting which one should we pick? I think they're all cool.
I do too. Recently, I've been interviewed for a number of reasons, and I tell people I'm a 20-year student of ufology. I've been studying ufology for 20 years. I'm a 4-time UFO experiencer. But if this much information exists on ufology, I know this much. Right. I know this much because the more I learn, the more I realize what I haven't, what I don't know yet. Like remote viewing is an aspect of all this. I don't know. I've never studied remote viewing, really. I've not studied crop circles. I've not studied Bigfoot, which could possibly be an interdimensional creature that seems to come and go, and it seems to be related to UFO sightings. Cattle mutilations, I haven't. There's just the more you study,
right.
the more there is to learn. It's a fascinating field.
It is. That's exactly on point with what I meant by within this category of UFOs or paranormal, whatever you want to classify it as. It seems we all have our very specific interests. Because my wife, for example, fascinated with Atlantis.
Yeah.
Well, Atlantis is not my. I don't really care.
But what if they were the ETs that first came here and built the pyramids and left and left their mark all over the world? It could be part of it.
Right? Sure, it could be. It just doesn't trip my trigger. I'm more interested in the abductions and the But
well, I think people who started in ufology, probably like you and I, are the craft, the nuts and bolts craft. And sure. Then the next part would be like a Betty and Barney Travis, the guys at Pascagoula who've been abducted and lived to tell tales of remarkable experiences. But when it gets to this really woo-woo, really hard to pinpoint stuff, it's like, who knows? Whoever runs the black government. And here's what I think. Do you believe in Majestic 12? Do you believe that was a real entity?
I do. Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
Absolutely. Because it was formed in September 47, 2 months after the crash. Mm-hmm. There are many documents that have been leaked that look and have been studied for years and years and years by people like Stanton Friedman and Richard Dolan. I know Richard Dolan. Richard says, as far as he can tell from his years and years of research, Majestic 12 was a real thing. It really happened. So whoever those guys were, maybe their sons or their grandsons, or now maybe their great-grandsons 80 years later, and of course it would be more than 12. It's probably 1,200 people. But It's a very tight circle. And they don't necessarily tell presidents or Congress or other military leaders. There's so many heavyweight people that just don't know. I don't think the last 5 presidents have really been told everything. George H.W. Bush, I think, might have been the last president who really knew, because he was the head of the CIA for a while.
Well, I was going to say he and Cheney. You know, you look at, you want to talk about deep state. Boy, when that first really came into vogue, asking, you know, I'd be the dumb guy. Who do you think is the deep state? And without fail, people go, well, Dick Cheney. And then, you know, kind of come up short. But, you know, between him and Bush, right, having run the CIA, I'm with you. I think he's the last president that knew just about everything or anything there is to be known. He knew it.
I totally agree with you. There was Dick Cheney was on the radio live. Maybe you've heard this. He was, when he was vice president, did a live radio interview. And a caller called in and said, Mr. Vice President, what can you tell us about extraterrestrials and UFOs? You know, and Dick Cheney on live radio said, "Sir, do you think I'm gonna share that kind of top secret information with you?" He didn't say there's no such thing. It's BS. It's nonsense. He said, "Do you think I'm going to share that kind of information with you?"
That's funny.
That's not a denial, right?
No, it's not. Well, you know, and it's a different context, but President Carter had his own sighting.
Right. Yeah, he tried. Carter tried. Clinton tried. Obama tried. Yep. Steve Bassett, my partner in HDA, Steve Bassett helped work with John Podesta to get Hillary Clinton, when she was running in 2016, to inject the UAP topic into the presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. And she did quite a few interviews, Hillary, that said, you know, when I'm president, I'm going to do my best to open that door. Well, you know, it didn't happen, but we've come close a few times, I think. But I think Cheney and Bush Sr., I think they were the last guys who really, really knew the full extent of everything.
Agreed. And you know, the only right, I'm as frustrated as anybody. Let's just assume that the president doesn't know any of this, and you know, scratch my head. Well, somewhere along the way, and this is not my own original thought, but somebody in intelligence or somewhere pointed out, well, yeah, but anybody that's elected, that's a temporary gig. And we don't share information with and I was like, I hadn't considered it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, 4 or 8 years. You know, they're finite. They're finite. And whoever's running that dark deep state, whoever's running it, I personally think it's generational. I think it's the sons and the grandsons and the great grandsons of the original Majestic 12, and they just keep it tight, that tight-fisted group going.
To what end?
It is so frustrating. It just really is. Tell me about space law. So you have a certificate or a degree in space. You're the first person in the history of my life that I've ever heard of that had that. So tell me what that is. What does that entail? What does that mean? Okay.
Well, first of all, space law, as it's generally used right now, there's a couple of primary areas. If Dan, you called me and said, "Hey, I want to go study some space law," my first question would be, okay, are you interested in defense? And by that, I mean kind of in like the national security kind of defense, because that's one big area of it. And that's, I don't know if your listeners know it, a lot of times, as much as I might get jammed up about insurance companies, a lot of times the insurance companies really kind of help set the parameters on what's going on. So every day now, new insurance companies are rolling out products dealing with space law, right? So Dan's satellite has now crashed into Chris's satellite.
Right.
Now what are we going to do? And the insurance companies eventually will have done a really good job with this, but they're kind of some of the leading edge. Hey, we've got this product and it works with that product like this product, and they're covering different launches. They're covering in orbit. They're covering low orbit. So that's one big area of space law, is that representing whether it's, you know, your private companies like Elon or SpaceX, thank you, or Blue Origin or what have you. And that's the part of this that I'm involved with. I work with a firm out of Tampa, a big firm that they have some aeronautical science guys. And so my involvement is usually dealing with, again, either launch issues at launch and how the insurances are going to pay, or the issues of exploding before getting to orbit.
I was going to say, like if a SpaceX takes off and explodes, and a piece hits the ground and hits someone and breaks their leg, like a person or their house. That has to be all kinds of insurance coverage, right?
Right. And I will, as far as I know, that case has not happened yet. So if any of your listeners have that happen, I would love the call, right? That would be pure plaintiff versus, right? And it would be very, very interesting, very fascinating. And I can imagine there's going to be an awful lot of this going on, right? This kind of thing.
But the contractors, Elon could say, my rocket was fine. The contractors screwed that fuse up and the fuse blew or something, whatever it was.
Right.
The O-ring, like the O-rings.
Yeah, spatial O-rings. So that's when I talk about space law, I'm on that more consumer insurance side of things. Then there is also your government space law guys that are dealing with all the rights in space. And once kind of you're up there, and can we put our satellites up? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can we have the Golden Dome that's being talked about? Can we do all these things? And then, of course, with Space Force, they have space law guys who are also looking over here, not just the U.S., but all spacefaring countries and what the interplay between them is. So, yes, and as you said, so I got a certificate in space law through the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. And I should say I am not an expert in space law. I would consider myself an expert in plaintiff personal injury trial work.
Right.
I'm not an expert in space law, but it's certainly an area of interest and study for me as well. And for folks that don't know, a really interesting read, if anybody can Google these, are the 5 outer space treaties. Are you familiar with those, Dan?
I didn't know there was such a thing, no.
Well, most people don't, and I think even the governments that are signatories to the 5 outer space treaties no longer care. But that's one of the issues. Anytime you're dealing with international law, which is kind of dictated by treaties, oftentimes the treaties are toothless because you and I agree that we're not going to do this, but I change my mind later. There's no mechanism for Dan to come and stop Chris from doing what he's doing other than maybe shaking your fist at me, right? But for example, no one is supposed to be mining on the moon per the moon treaty.
I was going to ask you about the moon. Does space law cover the moon?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It does. And there are treaties out there in these 5 treaties. The first one that I read that I thought was fascinating is, because we can all understand this, if you're in outer space and there's a distress call from another astronaut, it doesn't matter what country he's from, you got to scrub your mission and go get the astronaut. And so, that's easy to read and understand. So when I first started, I was like, well, this is fascinating. This is very easy. And so the treaties lay out all the cans and can'ts do. And a lot of it is, there's one specific to the moon. And so I first got into that stuff about 10 years ago. And now I'm seeing, whether anecdotal or real, hey, China's going to go mine on the moon. And I'm going, well, wait a second. I personally have read the treaty that says we're not supposed to do that, and you're doing it. And I would think that there would be somebody further up the food chain than me going, hey, we have these treaties and this isn't supposed to be happening.
So does the United Nations enforce the rules?
Yes, they are supposed to.
But who's going to stop China or North Korea or Putin if they want to do it? Who's going to stop that from happening?
Nobody. That's what I'm saying. The toothless treaties. Right. So I think they're very altruistic and they all have a great aim.
Yeah.
But they're unrealistic, and people are going to do what they're going to do regardless of the treaties or otherwise.
So they exist in theory, but there's no. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. We mentioned a little bit earlier about David Grush and Lou Elizondo and Admiral Gallaudet and some of these heavyweight people that have testified before Congress the last few years. Mm-hmm. And I mean, especially Grush. Grush was the one who got so much attention. Extraterrestrial entities exist. We have craft. We have bodies living and dead. We have technology. And, I live in LA and I watched it live and I thought, finally, we're going to have the front page of the LA Times. It's going to say aliens, page 19, Chris, a little article, page 19, this guy said there's aliens. And I just shook my head. I'm like, what is it going to take? What's it going to take? So do you think those congressional hearings have moved the ball forward a little bit, or do you think they're futile? What's your opinion about that?
To be determined, because I think we're on a good course, and
Okay.
it's getting attention,
Okay.
and it's getting in the mainstream. But again, back up a second. What did Grush really say? Oh, I've heard all this stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
he didn't see it with his own eyes. That's the
right.
problem. That's the problem. Yeah.
Right. And then, folks, if you're not a critical weigher of evidence, are coming away going, yeah, that guy said we have it. No, that's not what that guy said. So it certainly can't hurt to draw attention to something. It can't hurt to put something in the mainstream. But let's say these now 1,200 grandsons of MJ-12, do they give a rip? Are they going to care? And are they the ones that really have the stuff? So this is all actually really pointless. I don't know the answer to it, but I think more is better than less. Now, what the result's going to be, I don't know. But do you want my opinion on disclosure?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
And this probably is just optimistic, wishful thinking. But the way our government operates, disclosure is going to come either from another government, something that can't be refuted, or from some action by extraterrestrial themselves,
Right.
which then cannot be refuted.
Right.
It's going to be one of those two.
Right. Many people, experts that I know, feel that it's up to the extraterrestrials themselves. They are in charge of disclosure. They will come when they will reveal themselves when they're ready. One of the theories why we haven't been told, one of the theories is that they themselves have told the MJ-12, 1,200, whatever what they are, that, hey, don't reveal us yet. We're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. So you don't want to piss off, the Martians. You don't want to piss them off because they'll be upset. Right. That's a hell of a, Avi Loeb said that in an article 2 years ago. He said, he thinks that they don't want to be revealed yet, and that's a great reason why we don't know. That's, in my book, after they came, they land in Dodger Stadium, right? Well, if they land at Dodger Stadium, it's going to be pretty obvious that they're here.
That's what I'm saying, right? Wouldn't we all love something like that?
Yeah, that's what we're all working for. On that note, I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance to get the attention of some Hollywood writers and producers and directors to meet and interview and talk to experiencers and try to, nurture the next era of films and TV shows and documentaries. So my question to you, my friend, is how do you think Hollywood could or should help the disclosure movement forward, or should they not get involved at all?
I think, I know one of the goals, obviously, of the HDA is a little bit more continuity in the storytelling. I think we would be well served. And now I get it. Would it be interesting to watch a movie about the friendly alien? Maybe, maybe not. But to the continuing, everything's always couched as a negative, whether it's movies or the government. Well, we got to have the defense budget. We have to. So everything is being couched as though it would be this terrible, scary, can't be here kind of thing. I see it the other. Wouldn't it be wonderful and incredible to be exposed to the rest of the galaxy? So I think from a storytelling standpoint, something to, to soothe people's fear, a little more positivity in, what could really be gained from a relationship with extraterrestrials. Maybe it's one of those, if everybody was clamoring for it, right? Maybe they'd go, hey, now is good because now people don't think we're a bunch of jerk aliens.
Right. Well, in the history of Hollywood, there's only been a handful of, we'll call them benevolent alien movies: Close Encounters, E.T., Contact, the one Arrival. There's only been like a handful. Starman, when they come, and they didn't come to kill us and eat us.
Right.
Because there's War of the Worlds and Independence Day and these my favorite episode of Twilight Zone. It's called To Serve Man. I don't know if you know that one. When
I don't.
the aliens come with a book. They have a book called To Serve Man, and people think, oh, this is great. They're going to come help us. And the book is a cookbook. To Serve Man. It's a cookbook. And it's revealed at the very end of that show. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to eat us. I think Hollywood historically goes for the fear factor, and they want to make the billions of dollars and, have Independence Day and have, Will Smith punch an alien in the face. But like you said, and even in my book, and I have a screenplay for my book, it's they're benevolent. They come to help us. They get rid of nuclear weapons. They cure disease. They help mankind. They end famine. And what would that look like? What would the world look like? It's a utopian. My book is a utopian story. But a lot of people have read it and said, Dan, this should be a movie. I go, I know. Tell me about it. My mother, where's the movie? I go, Mom, I'm working on it. I think we're just about out. Anything else you want to say about the book? How can people get this book? Tell us the title. Do you have a copy handy?
I do.
There it is. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. I read it. I thought it was terrific. So I would imagine it's on Amazon.
Yep, available on Amazon. Roswell: The Truth on Trial. Shameless plug for my own firm. I think the easiest way to get it, because there's a lot of other stuff on Amazon. If you were to go to my law firm website, which is lawgroupofiowa.com, going to be a lot easier. Halfway down the homepage, big red button and a picture of my book, and it says "Buy Chris's book," and that will take you to the exact.
Oh, that's great. So your partners let you put that up there, huh? On the website?
He might not know about that.
Well, don't let him watch this interview.
No, I won't. I'll make sure.
Keep this one off your social.
Right.
Oh, that's so funny. That's great, man. I love that. Well, look, it's something to be proud of. I'm looking forward to your Crop Circle book. You'll keep me posted. You and I are friends now. You're in the HDA, and we've been collaborating with promotion on your book. How are sales, by the way? Are sales happening?
They're happening. It could always be better, but they're happening.
Yeah, it's tough. I've written and published 5, not self-published. I've written and had published 5 books.
Wow.
And I think maybe each one sold about 100 copies, Chris. So, unless you're Stephen King or Howard Stern or Bruce Springsteen, it's hard to get a book to be a bestseller. But I thought your book was wonderful. I thought the premise was totally unique. And I'm looking forward to your other books. Thank you for being my colleague and my friend and doing this dopey show for me on a Monday morning. This will air Thursday night. And just stick around for 1 second. I have to make sure it uploads. That's it for this episode of From Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Check out Dan Harary, author.com. My books. Check out HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. And check out Chris's the Iowa. Tell me again.
Law Group of Iowa.
Lawgroupofiowa.com, and buy Roswell on Trial. It's a wonderful book. That's it for this week. Take care. Have a great summer. And I'll see you again from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.